book club lovers. It is such a pleasure to have you here for our season of our last the season for 2022 so far. We will be back again before the year ends. We have picked something juicy, something really thought-provoking to end off the season with, and I am very happy to lead tonight's discussion. As you know, is my custom, I like to start every book club with a quote from a famous African, and today I thought we should have something from someone really awesome like Nelson Mandela to close off what has been a great season, I think, so far. And his quote, which I think encapsulates many of the themes in the stories, but also this author's journey, is this: may your choices reflect your hopes and not your fears. And it's succinct and it's to the point, but it hits you between the eyes, and much like the truths that are shared in this author's book. Tonight in the studio, we have Alice Takawira. Alice, how are you? Welcome to the book club.
I'm well, and thank you for having me.
That's awesome. We are so pleased to have you on the show tonight. And for those of you who are meeting Alice for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about her. Alice Takawira was born and raised in Zimbabwe after receiving a bachelor's degree in physiotherapy from the University of Zimbabwe. She relocated to London for work. In 2004, she moved to America to attend Emory University and graduated with a master's in public health. Alice currently lives in Atlanta with her husband and 2 kids. When she's not working as a geriatric physical therapist or chauffeuring her children from one after another school extracurricular activity, she enjoys relaxing with a glass of wine and binge watching foreign language dramas. I like that pastime. And whenever possible, she likes to travel, taste exotic foods, and learn some words or greetings in a foreign language. Alice is the proud creator of the Wearinga Girls Book Club on Facebook, a place to connect with fellow book club lovers or fellow book lovers. If you want to follow Alice for what she's doing, both on the book club and with her writing, you can follow her on Facebook at Alice Takawira Writes, all one word, or Instagram at alice.takawira.writes, or on Twitter at rudotax. So, Alice, tell us how you started writing and how this particular book came about, considering that it's not the first book you've ever written in your life.
Okay, so Turning Tables is my first published book, but it is not the first book that I've ever written. I used to write in high school, and a lot of my writing is usually inspired by whatever is going on around me, things that I see, that, you know, conversations I have, or anything that just strikes a chord somewhere in my subconscious, because later on the wheels in my head start spinning, like, what if this happened to that? What if this had happened this way and not that way? And that's how I start creating characters in my head and dialogue and come up with a story. So I started when I was 13, and I never took it seriously to the point of wanting to publish right away. But this time around, when I decided that I had an interesting story in my head, I wrote it down and decided to take it all the way.
Right. So for those of you who are unaware, Alice has written a book and released it called Turning Tables. And the book is about 2 lovers, 2 continents, 2 cultures, and 1 unforgettable love story. Maita, a Zimbabwean graduate student, has returned to London on summer break with one goal: to reunite with Ade, her Nigerian friend. She made a terrible mistake when she broke up with Ade, and now she wants him back. On the flight to London, she meets Chris, a British gentleman who's instantly captivated by Maita and pursues her relentlessly. When Ade rejects Maita's efforts to rekindle their romance, she turns to Chris. Chris are forced to confront racism, the complexities of an interracial relationship, and their insecurities. But Maita has never forgotten Ade, nor has he ever gotten over her. Then, in a sudden turn of events, a determined Ade resurfaces and attempts to reconnect with Maita. But Chris is doubly prepared to keep her at any cost, unleashing a dangerous chain of events that will forever alter the course of all 3 lives. How far will each man go to win her love? Turning Tables explores the challenges and triumphs of multicultural and multiracial relationships, a poignant and engaging story of the power of love, missed opportunities, second chances, and the pitfalls of obsession. If you want to get a copy of this book, you can get onto Alice's website, links which you can find on the social media channels we shared before, and it is available wherever books are sold, primarily Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And soon, we hope we'll be able to also get some hard copies on the continent, and when they are available, we'll definitely let you know. So, what was your goal in telling this particular story, Turning Tables?
When I started writing, I honestly had no intention to publish. I didn't have an audience. I was simply writing because I enjoy writing. But as my story evolved, as the characters evolved, I found that those experiences that the characters go through are not unique to what I was writing. A lot of immigrants around the world, I'm sure, would relate, especially those of us from the African diaspora. We basically understand what it feels like to leave your home country, go to another country and try and settle. And in that process, you're also trying to maintain a social life. And there's a lot of challenges that come with race and dating and different cultures. And I suddenly felt like this was a story that needed to be told, because this is what we experience, but perhaps it hasn't really been told in our voice. And I'm sure there are lots of movies and some books as well that do talk about it. Americana by Chimamanda, she did an amazing job with her story. You know, she talked about hair, she talked about all our challenges in different aspects. So I felt like more voices need to be heard. So I just threw my head in and thought this would be a good way to tell the story.
I love that. And I think that is one thing that you did really, really well in this book, is you brought a Zimbabwean voice to the African immigrant story overseas. So I think that, we've had great hits from Nigeria, particularly Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is one of the names that's more well-known in the international mainstream. And then, we've got Ghanaian writers as well, who've also made their imprint. With Zimbabwean writers, yeah, you do hear, but you don't hear much of the immigrant story overseas. And I did think all throughout reading this book that this is very Zimbabwean. I could hear the voices, I could hear the dialogue between Zimbabweans themselves, but then I could also hear the dialogue between the Zimbabweans speaking to Nigerians, speaking to British people, and the different kinds of Zimbabweans as well. So you did that really, really well in terms of your goal for writing the book. This leads me to my next question is, well, how has the response been so far? You've recently released it. And what has surprised you about the response to the book?
First of all, I am pleasantly surprised at how everyone who's read it and gotten back to me has been everyone's enjoyed it. The one thing that keeps coming out is it's relatable. It's a relatable story. It's an easy read. And also that it had an unexpected ending, which everybody loved, but they loved the way that the story evolved. And it just was something different from what they expected and what they've often read. So the response has been so positive. I am so humbled by it. Like, I didn't think that it would even be here today. So because of what it has become and the reaction I'm getting, I am encouraged to perhaps keep writing. And, I'm pleasantly surprised at the positive responses. So I am happy with what I'm hearing right now.
Well, definitely, I think if one of your big goals was definitely to bring voice and I think diversity of voice, to the African story, you can't stop here. There are so many more stories that can be told, and so many characters that were kind of in the supporting cast of this book, that were intriguing and very interesting. And I personally would like to know, what happens in their lives if there was ever going to be a spin-off. But that brings me to the subject of the book. And one of the things I noticed about the book, and I always find this brave, is that you used a narrative point of view that was, although in the past tense, very much diverse. So it starts out like a love triangle. So we hear Ade tell his side of the story, Maita, or Bubbles, as we come to know her, tell her side of the story, and Chris. And then it kind of later on in the book, part 5, towards the end, sort of starts to become a bit more of a love quartet. So you allow us to hear for briefly from people like Norma, Ade's love interest, and Bola, Ade's sister. Why did you choose for your first book to do something as brave as that? Because those are different cultures, therefore very different mindsets. Maybe all millennial, definitely, but I mean, that is very, very challenging, particularly also because a character on their own is a full-blown story and a very difficult thing to get your head around, to carry that voice authentically. But then you did it for the men as well. And I can't think of harder men to write for than a British white male and a Nigerian immigrant. Where did you get that bravery from?
Okay, I'll start by saying that my book is fiction. The characters are fictitious. The dialogue I made up. All of it that transpires from the beginning to the end. But I will say for a fact, it was inspired by experiences, my own, some others. You know, like I mentioned, I take from what I see, right? So a lot of the things that the character's gone through, I have experienced. So for example, she comes from the university, she went to the University of Zimbabwe, and so did I. She went to Emory University, and so did I. She worked in London, she's a physical therapist, and I am too, right? And I chose to go that route because I wanted it to be as authentic as I could. I felt like if I wrote about a lawyer or an engineer, I would be hard pressed to know what they did on a daily basis, to really bring that to reality, because I really don't know what an engineer does on a daily basis, but I can tell you all day about what a physical therapist like myself does. So I took from my own experience as a physical therapist, my own experience coming to, first going to England, the visa process, trying to get your work permit, all of that the character goes through, I've gone through that. It was easy for me to take from my experience, and I know it's not just unique to me, it happened to so many other people because I've talked to so many different people. My own husband is Zimbabwean too, and he also moved, he's a physician, and he also gone the London route and then came to America. So we have so many similarities. So I took from that to inform my characters. I've dated outside my race and culture in terms of non-Zimbabwean. I am happily married to a Zimbabwean, but before I got married, I had a life. And I have dated Nigerian. I have dated white British. So I could inform my character from those experiences. And I think that's what made it very authentic, because a lot of people say to me, oh my gosh, I had that same experience. So I know someone who had a boyfriend who did this and said this, just like so and so said, you know. So it's coming from a point of informed experience, should I put it that way, and then literally creating fiction around it. So that's what I think helped me to make it as authentic as I could. So for instance, I always say I could have made up a university and said she went to the University of Zamunda, right? But I thought, you know, let's use the University of Zimbabwe. You know, I've been, I can write about it, and why not, right? So I absolutely took from my own experiences, just people around me. I've lived around. I lived in London, and I've had friends who were nurses. I saw what they were doing in their jobs, and some of the experiences. You know, I talked about black tax. You know, we have the character. We had to keep sending money home and stuff like that. We all know at least one person, if not ourselves, who is under that pressure constantly. So those are things that happen in real life. I just literally took that and created these interesting characters to tell the story.
Mm. And authenticity definitely did ring true. It reminds me of the famous quote by Jane Austen about writing what you know. And I do think you always have so much more authority as an author when you draw from what you know to write. And I think two things that struck me, well, actually, three things that struck me was the Zimbabwean experience overseas. So the emphasis on how many Zimbabweans start out in nursing, and then kind of piggyback off that into either academics or, kind of like the field that they want. The other thing was the hospital scenes. So in the very beginning, when you recount the story of Maita and Ade falling in love, the hospital scenes are so crisp. You can literally, you feel like you're in that place. And so I think that really, really rang through very, very with a strong authenticity. And then I think it was also when they move to, or when she moves rather to Atlanta, the American feel is also quite strong. So you did that really, really well, and that was a job well done. And I think that probably could be one of the reasons why it was relatable. I think the one of the other reasons it was relatable, when I'm thinking about my experience of reading the book, is that the language or your writing style is very much like you're telling a good friend an intimate story with all of the detail. And so the characters came to us in that way, which I wondered whether it helped them or harmed them as sympathetic characters, because there's points in the book where, especially for the main three, Ade, Chris, and Maita, I'm like, I'm not sure whether I like these people. But then I think that's what makes it real and human. Just to pause there and acknowledge our guests that are watching on Facebook, in particular, Norman Abnorm. Hi, ladies from Zim. Thank you. Norman, it's great that you're watching and tuning in. And hi, Moira and Zikiti, watching from Chitungwiza Zim. We love Cheetah. Thank you so much for joining in. So those characters, like I was saying, not always sympathetic, but very relatable from that point of view. And why, when I was thinking about those narrative points of view and how they were possibly so real, I then thought about, were you also trying to make a statement about how love, which can be a good thing, can sometimes bring out the worst in people?
Yes, well, I will be honest and say, as I wrote the characters, I hadn't planned out what their personalities would be. I didn't intend for any of them to be the way they turned out. I was just writing. I was literally putting one foot in front of the other and just going. And the story was just developing as I went along. And it was a surprise when I gave a few people to read the draft that they didn't like Maita. I'm like, wait, what? I thought she was a fun, bubbly girl. What are you talking about? And they'll say, well, she was mean to this one and that one. And then, of course, everybody loved Chris in the beginning. And then it's like, oh my gosh. Ade had a time when he was not so nice either, right? None of that was intentional. It was just how the story evolved as I created the dialogue and imagined what they were each going through and how they would react to each other's behaviors. It literally just, the chips just fell that way. So what I then learned was that humans are not perfect. None of us are. Even though we don't intend to hurt anyone, sometimes the choices we make do eventually hurt somebody. I don't think Maita was a mean girl who set out to be mean by any means. I feel like she was young. She was in her 20s, naive and very sure of herself, and nothing would stop her, right, from achieving her goals. And it didn't matter who you were. She was just walking over everybody whilst she did that. But she wasn't mean as I was writing her. It just, when you piece it up with the other characters, was like, yeah, she wasn't a very nice person in the end. So no, I didn't intend for it to be that way, but I was glad that it turned out that way, because humans are not perfect. And I think that's what makes the book even more relatable, makes the characters more relatable, because each and every one of them had flaws that people can also relate to.
Definitely. Their flaws were very relatable. and also to a certain degree, some of their lack of self-awareness. And in particular, when I think of self-awareness, they all come to mind. There were definitely some big blind spots happening there, which made, a lot of red flags kind of pop up in the beginning. I was like, oh, where is this going? But particularly when I think of Ade and his conversation with his brother, which is kind of like midway in the book, when he's now wondering, should he have rejected Maita or Bubbles in the first instance of her trying to make a comeback?
Right.
And that conversation was very, very revealing of, his lack of self-awareness. And I found that very, very interesting, because what then shined through was that his brother Benga was actually really, I think, one of the most sympathetic characters for me. I really enjoyed him in that one scene you gave him. So stingy, Alice. That one scene you gave him, but you used him really, really well. And that was awesome. We have a lot of heat in the comments. People who are joining us, and I just want to say hey, because they're all saying hi to us. So we've got Tendi Tasia, hi, watching from Zoom on Facebook. Emily Chidziwa, hey, Alice, so proud of you. Definitely echo that, co-sign that. Spread a smile on Facebook. Hello, it's Daddy with the red heart there. We're feeling the love. Thanks so much for joining us on this wintry night. Kennedy Mudukuti, great book. Yeah, I second that. Something that's easy to read as always goes down well. Siviliswe Ndlovu, greetings from Germany on YouTube. Thank you so much for giving us some love in the YouTube comments. If you haven't read the book, please do. You will enjoy it. I agree with that. It's an easy read, it's a forgiving read, but you will definitely think it's worth it. It will make you think about yourself and about what healthy relationships look like. So I agree with you there, Kennedy. And Sifilisiwe, sorry, I keep butchering your name. Please forgive me. I actually loved Ade from the beginning. Wow. Okay, so we have some people who also have their own favorites. So I'm squarely with Benga, whom you only gave one scene, but Ade's got some love in the comments, the first so far. So definitely Nigeria is winning there. But this book is more than just a love story, and it's more than just a story of a love triangle. There are many, many themes about relationships, and I think the thing that struck out to me was relationships and control, and how we weaponize things like communication, sex, and money as a form of control to mask our insecurities in relationships. And particularly in this book, we see pictures of where that goes to the extreme of control in terms of obsessiveness. I found that very, very interesting, because usually when you're reading a love story, you're looking for the rom-com moments, the Saturday moments, but you went for the jugular, and you went for a real story, people that were too real, and some real relationship issues there, particularly the issue of control, which was mirrored in all of the relationships that were there. And how people play games with control, and the prize of the game is always marriage or possession, and expectations also around the ideal man or woman, the difference between being independent, interdependent, and supportive, and obviously the running theme, which is that all of these characters have a goal of wanting to be happy in love. Is this kind of like your observation of what you see and hear in the world around you? Because it did really ring true. I mean, I read that, and in some of the pictures, I was like, "Ooh, I think I know somebody that looks like somebody I know." Is that what was going on there with those themes?
Yes. So a lot of those relationship angles are things that I've absolutely seen, observed. Some I've experienced myself. Just, when I'm talking to my girls, everybody has a story to tell about some guy they dated and this guy and something that happened to this person and that person. So I took from so many different sources. Like, a lot of people might find themselves in these characters, or even in a snippet of a dialogue. You may be like, oh, I think I've heard something like this before, because I took from just everything I've been through as a young adult, even from the time I was a student at University of Zimbabwe. I think I actually mentioned that, how when we used to date guys, you know, girls were pretty mean to guys. And I also wanted to point that out. This book, I think, shows how women are not always the good, you know, the good guy. Women can also abuse men in a way. We always find in romance books, it's always the girl that's heartbroken, and, you know, in this case, the girl's going around breaking the hearts, right? And I remember as a student at University of Zimbabwe, we, you know, a guy would ask you out and you'd go on a date and bring like 2 of your friends, and this poor guy had to pay for all 3 of you, because in Zimbabwe, I can't speak for anywhere else, I'll only speak for what I know. In Zimbabwe, it was not uncommon for a man to have to cater to a girl and her friends, okay? And then you move across the pond, you come over to England or America, and it's a no-no. Like, what are you talking about? In fact, we need to go 50-50 on this date, right? And you're like, whoa, culture shock, right? So I'm not the only person who's gone through that. My friends have, a lot of people I know. So I threw all that in there to just bring up the dialogue and to also show that these are our differences that we don't see talked about a lot. So yeah, that's pretty much where that came from.
Definitely. And I think definitely the issue of male support and weaponizing it, you know, which you do in the, you do so skillfully in the book, or observe so skillfully in the book, is definitely one of the ways in which we see, I think, the bigger theme of the book, which is culture and its impact on relationships. You know, obviously the obvious ones are the juxtaposition of Ade as a lover or a boyfriend, and Chris as a lover and a boyfriend. But Ade is particularly interesting to me in terms of what you're saying about culture, because you then use him to show us that even though he is African, there's a big difference between dating a Nigerian and dating a Zimbabwean. And it's actually his experience of the 2 Zimbabwean girls that does that more than the experience of Maita dating him. So well done for that, very skillfully done, and showing us without telling us about those cultural differences, because it's much bigger than race,
Right.
you know, and it's much more diverse and much more complex than Black versus white. So I found that very, very interesting. And then I was shocked, because when I read the synopsis of the book earlier, and I was like, oh, so this is a love triangle, and there's going to be a Nigerian, and I'm sure he's going to be like this. He's going to be loud, flashy, um, and possibly with some criminal element. And, you know, when you allude to the danger, I'm like, it's definitely going to be the Nigerian. He's the one that's going to escalate things and you know, do that. But Ade was a pleasant surprise for me. And it made me also then look at some of my own stereotypes and say, you know, it's time to look beyond that and actually get to know people for who they are. And I think when you are writing a cultural story, that's one of the challenges, is to learn not to reinforce the stereotypes, but through the stereotypes and challenging us on the stereotypes, you helped us to see the people for who they really were as people. So well done to you for that. But what is, especially when it comes to building healthy relationships, and especially romantic relationships?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I agree with that. I didn't want to reinforce any stereotypes, and Nigerians should not be painted with one brush. And I think your favorite character, Banger, brought that up when he was having a dialogue with his brother. How, you know, everyone assumes that Nigerians, that one way or the other, they're either going to be trying to steal your money through some fraud scheme, or they're flashy, flamboyant, you know, and of which there are some that are that way, but they're also just regular people like the rest of us, right? And Tolu, and so speaking about that talking to the character of Benga, he was your classic Nigerian who goes to school, becomes a doctor, and the same as Ade, right? There's that other side of them, right? They excel very well in other countries. They become doctors, they become engineers. So I wanted to showcase that positive side as well, and not only reinforce the negative side of it.
Definitely. And then I think the other theme that I found very interesting in the book is the issue of third parties. So the love triangle that becomes a hexagon by the end of the book, those third parties, but also the third parties in the voices of family. So Noma and her mother, even though her mother never speaks a single line of dialogue in the book, her voice in terms of the issue of her expectations and the pressure she creates in the relationship can still be heard. And I found that very, very interesting, the impacts that third parties have. And we got a wide spectrum. There were also friends like Rosie and Lindy. There were also, I don't want to give too much away. Third parties had their own third parties that you discover later on in the book. And like there were almost at one point a lot of people in this relationship that was originally and throughout the book actually was mainly Ade and Maita's relationship. And I found that very interesting because some of those voices were good voices, but actually the good voices were in the minority. A lot of the voices were mirrored through their own toxic experiences. What advice would you give to people trying to build healthy relationships about third parties and the influence on a good and long-lasting relationship?
Well, I think in any relationship, whether it be romantic or platonic, there has to be full communication. Like if you notice the relationship between Maita and Lindy, they were friends, but they were straight up with each other. Like if Maita was going through something, she would talk to Lindy about it, and Lindy would tell her as it is, and as much as it can hurt you in that moment, Maita would go back and reflect on what she's been through based on what her friend has told her, and it would inform her decision afterwards. So I think communication is key, and honesty is key. And I may be one of those friends that may be brutally honest sometimes. I've been accused of being brutally honest. Like I just say it like it is. And sometimes it hurts someone to hear the truth, but they need to hear the truth. So I would definitely say honest communication. And then, of course, the things that we should try maybe not to do is to just be sarcastic or mean for the sake of it. And Lindy was pretty good at doing that as well, So you've got to be sensitive about another person's feelings. You've got to be sensitive about what they're going through. And it's very easy for us to judge what somebody when they're going through something. If you're not in those shoes, it's so easy to say, don't do this, do that. You've got to find a good way to approach that person and tell them without making them feel ashamed of what they're doing or without hurting their feelings. And that's a very difficult thing for a lot of us to do. But I feel like that's good to create and build strong relationships. So communication and honesty really is what I think is key.
And I do think definitely in the way that Ade and Maita as characters in their own journeys learn to communicate. There are two pivotal moments in the book where you see them have an opportunity to communicate differently, and they take up that chance, showing that there's been some growth, which is really, really quite good. And if you want to know what those two moments are, you better read the book, because now I'm referencing the last third of the book, and then I'll be in trouble with all the people who haven't read the book. And those of you who do want to know where you can get the book, check out Amazon.com. It's in all the Amazon stores, and you can get it in Kindle, or you can get a paperback delivered to you if you are in the area that is served by those stores. Then Barnes & Noble also is carrying the book, so you can also get it.
So it's online.
Online, yes. Yeah. So you can look up the book Turning Tables by Alice Takawira, and you can get it. And remember, you can follow her on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and her website details are there. You can contact her directly. And you can order the book for yourself, and I encourage you to do that. Even for those of us here in Zimbabwe, the Kindle price is very forgiving. You can afford to part with those few pennies for this enjoyable experience. So definitely do yourself a favor and get that book, so you can find out those two pivotal moments of growth for yourself. Now,
can I add that if you have iBooks, either on your iPad or iPhone, you can also download from Apple Books. So it should be on any iPad or iPhone, anywhere where you have Apple products, you can find it.
Awesome. So there you have it. The book is literally there. We thought we could hear from Alice, firstly, a reading from her book, and secondly, well, before we hear a reading from her book, just a little word about the self-publishing process, because I am so impressed by the quality of this book, knowing that it was self-published, and seeing all of the promotions that you've done on your own. And guys, Alice works, and she mothers, and she wifes, and daughters, and all those kinds of other things, which we know as an African woman, no matter where you are on the continent, those are huge role play. But she's doing all of that fabulously, and also promoting her book really, really well online and in person. And I'm very, very impressed, considering that she's doing this as a self-publisher and not with any trade publishing support. Tell us a little bit about the process and give us some advice for those.
So self-publishing basically means
considering going on the self.
I think it broke up a little bit. Okay. Okay, so self-publishing basically means that I put everything together, cover to cover. Every decision that was made about this book was made by me and my husband. So I had a raw manuscript. I took it to some agents. I did try to do the traditional publishing route, and that didn't work out very well. A lot of the agents rejected it because they just, I guess, couldn't figure out where they would place the book in the market. So I chose to do it alone. I had to do a lot of research to understand the industry of publishing. It's a whole education unto itself. I had to understand the process of getting a raw manuscript to the buyer. And I went through rounds of editing. And I think that's the most important thing that I would say, is that you have to invest a lot of time and money in making this product a quality product. So I had to think about my book cover. I designed that book cover myself, and I tell everyone I am so proud of my book cover because I designed it with the help, of course, of graphic designers, to contract some people along the way. I contracted my editors. I had to find them myself and then, have them do the work. An amazing guy called Mark Thomas, who I found on Fiverr. He's based in London. He helped me put my vision for the book cover come to life. So he put it all together, but I literally had the vision for how I wanted Mayita to look. Chris and Ade, just everything you see on the cover is how I imagined it. And then I had to find someone else to format the book. So you have a raw manuscript, a Word document. That's not how it is when it goes to print. It has to go through like a proper formatting process. And I solicited somebody else. I think he's in Denmark or something. I had a guy from India do my book trailer, which I'm very proud of, and a guy from Norway do my website. So as you can see, I was literally shopping around for these people to help me put it together. But the decision to do anything was pretty much my decision. Like, how do you write a blurb? A blurb is the back of the book, like this blurb right here. All of that stuff I had to learn. And I joined some Facebook groups. So if you're trying to write a book, I would advise you to join any groups that you see. They're free. You just sign up on Facebook. A lot of advice from other writers, a lot of people, questions, anything you have, any questions, they will help you on there. I took a class Alexandra Torres. She's a self-published author who is now advising other people. And it was a very informative, pretty affordable class where I learned the ABCs of book promotion, you know, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now. So I wasn't born with this. I had to educate myself. I had to learn the craft, and it took a lot of time. It took a lot of money, a lot of money. And, you know, time was also a very, very big factor, trying to squeeze all this in my schedule, my everyday schedule. So it was challenging, but I would say very, very rewarding, because now that I've done it, I can safely say I know how to publish a book, you know. And I hope that when I write my next book, I hope that agents will be more willing to read. A traditional publisher is always great because they give you a big budget. Your book can go so much further when you have a big publishing house behind you. It's so much better. But I'm glad for this journey, because I have learned a new set of skills that I didn't have. And I'm just happy that everyone who's read it says to me, it could be any book they pick up from a bookstore or Barnes & Noble. Like, the quality is that good. So it makes me feel like it was worth it. It took me 3 years to get it here. So I feel like the time, the money, all of that I put into it was absolutely worth it.
Awesome. And definitely it was worth it. And I think the dividends will pay off with time. We've got a few more comments before we wrap up that I'd like to acknowledge. YouTube is now really hotting up for us, so I'm happy about that. Phyllis says, well done, Rudo, proud of you. Co-sign that. Renai says, well done, Murora. So we've got family on today's chat too. And Vivian, hi from England. We are happy to hear from you, the English people in the heat wave. Tembe Prudence Moyo, hello, Alice, that's wonderful. I'm very proud of you. So thank you all for joining us tonight. As is our custom, when we end a show, we like to hear from the author and from the book. So we've asked Alice to prepare a reading from the book and to read from a portion of the book that she believes is something women need to hear right now. And so to sign us off tonight, Rudo, Alice, let's hear from you, and let's hear a little taster of the book. And like I said, if you want to get your own copy of the book, you can get it on Barnes & Noble online, Amazon, and iBook. And you can find Rudo on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And on all of her social media profiles, you can find a link to her website where you can find out more about her book and join her on her writing journey and read her fabulous blogs. So Alice, take it for us tonight.
Okay, so I'm going to read from chapter 19, and this is Maita's point of view. And you said I should read something that I feel like women today should hear. And I feel like this is a very interesting scene without giving away too much. So I won't mention who she's referring to, because I think that would give away what happens in the book. So the male character, the male reference is not mentioned. Okay. All right. So this is Maita speaking. His reaction when I attempted to leave him later that day left me even more terrified. It was hours after our big fight in the late afternoon when he fell to the ground, clutching his chest, gasping for air, having what looked like cardiac arrest, and crying, "Don't leave me." I remember how I panicked and fell to my knees beside him to check if he was okay. And when I said I was calling 911, he cried, "No, don't. Just stay here with me." And he gradually simmered down and stopped crying. Before the panic attack, I had packed my bags to go to Simone's till I had a clear plan. But instead, I unpacked and stayed. I couldn't leave him alone, not like that. That was how we had come to this point in our relationship where he was treading carefully around me and trying hard to impress me. And I was seriously considering my options. I deserved better than this toxic relationship. I had to figure out my next move. As much as I would have liked to walk away and prove a point to him that I was independent, I didn't have the courage because I did care for him and I wanted us to work. I believed I was in love, but our misunderstandings were fracturing our bond, and this fight was a big blow. I soaked in the warm tub, humming along to Babyface's smooth voice, and I concluded that I was staying for now. Maybe we just needed time to work through this rough patch. But how much more insult could our relationship withstand? So I chose that because I feel like a lot of women, usually a lot of women, men too, I don't want to make it a, like women only, but we find ourselves in toxic relationships. They could be abusive or emotionally, physical, otherwise. And a lot of times we know deep inside that this is wrong and we need to get out of this, but we just cannot for various reasons. Sometimes it's financial, if you're financially dependent on someone, emotionally dependent, or it could simply be, what will so and so say? What will my parents think? Or, so I feel like a lot of times when you're in a bad situation, deep down, there's that voice that lets you know that you are. And we choose to ignore it or choose to stay like she is in this case. She's aware of her problem, but for whatever reason, she's chosen to stay for now, she says. And I think it's a common problem. I don't want to call it a problem. It's an issue that's universal to a lot of people, male and female. And I just thought it was something that was an important thing that I is a theme in the book about choices, the choices we make and what influences them. So it's easy for others to judge why you're staying, but deep down you understand why you need to stay. But at some point, I think it's always good to get that strength to walk away, the strength to do better for yourself. But yeah, so that's what I chose to read for you guys.
Well, thank you very much, Alice. And I think that was a very good choice considering how we started the interview, talking about making our choices from a place of hope or fear. And if you want to know what choice Maita eventually makes and where it comes from, get a book. It'll be worth it. I was satisfied with the ending. You don't get that from many books or TV these days in the world we're living in. And I was satisfied with that. And I'm looking forward to your next offering and looking forward to the book being available in Southern Africa in hard copy. It has been a great season finale show with the Mrs. Takawira, Alice Takawira, and we look forward to your journey. And we hope to have you back, maybe to just talk about self-publishing in the future. To all of you who've joined, thank you very much. We've been warmed by your comments and all the love that you've shown us. We are signing off tonight, and we'll be back again with more content later on in the year. But for now, we'll be taking a season break as we allow ourselves to thaw from this icy cold winter in Zimbabwe and